Hello and welcome to another session of Clarify by ARC. And today's session, we are going to look at the 10 mistakes that the SBR candidates make, which cost them the paper, which cost them the passing. So, looking at the mistakes, we also will be looking at what are the fixes and what can the candidates do in order to ensure those mistakes are not repeated. Now, these mistakes are identified from past couple of examiner reports. All right. Okay, so what you need to remember first is when you are revising SBR as a whole, you do revise the knowledge, you do revise the standards, you try to recall the definitions, the recognition criteria, the measurement, what the standard requires, what the standard elements are, what the disclosure requirements is, right? So you recall it, you understand it, you study it to a point where you become an expert in those areas, the content or the knowledge aspect of SBR. But what the examiner wants you to do is, okay, you have that knowledge, you need to have that knowledge, but examiner wants to assess how your judgment applies based on the knowledge that you've gained from the content throughout the knowledge aspect, how you have gained the ability to apply your own judgment. All right. So you need to apply your judgment to the exhibit, to the scenario that is given to you in the question. All right. And to do that, there are multiple aspects that you need to look at, which if you overlook, you would be in a troubling situation. All right. Okay, now these are the 10 mistakes that stem from 4 habits. The first one is the reading habit. When you don't read what is asked, you read what you think is asked. Therefore, you go on making the mistakes of ignoring the verb and merging sub requirements. We'll break it down how to fix those. And then the second habit that the mistakes stem from is the application habit or your usage of application skills, because you are supposed to apply your knowledge to the exhibit and the scenario that is given. And if you fail to apply it, you bring what is not relevant. And that is where the candidates make the mistakes of knowledge dumping, copy pasting the exhibit, meaning copying the exhibit and pasting as it is, and leaving out the why, not justifying, not bringing out the why, rather bringing out only a sub portion of the requirement fulfillment. And then the third habit that the mistakes stem from is when you overlook the second aspect, when you just focus your attention to one part of the question, one part of the element, right? And that is where the candidates make the mistake of answering one side only when you are required to assess and answer both the sides of the requirement, and when you name the threat only rather than identifying the principles that's being threatened and the actions that you need to take if you are required to take an action. And then the fourth habit that the mistakes stem from is the time management habit or time management skill, where you trying to survive the clock, you go on making certain mistakes because you fail to survive the clock. All right. So mistake of overspending on question one, mistake on spreadsheet technique, how you use spreadsheet, and then neglecting the section B of your paper, meaning neglecting the question 3 and question 4. All right. Now let's look at the mistake number 1. The biggest mistake that the candidates make is knowledge dumping. Whatever knowledge that they have, whatever standard that they recall, when they see that standard somewhere in the requirement, somewhere in the exhibit, they go on bringing all the knowledge that they know about that standard because they are confident about that standard, right? The knowledge of that standard. And they go on putting everything out there on the paper. All right. So only when you fulfill the requirement in the exhibit, you understand that the knowledge that you're bringing in is relevant. So remember, to avoid knowledge dumping, bring the knowledge that can be applied to the scenario. Read the requirement, look at what of the standard is required, bring only those aspects of the standard. All right. Now, let's say a question wants you to talk about how a transfer from IAS 16 revaluation model to IAS 40 fair value model. So you need to specifically limit your answer to IAS 16 revaluation model and IAS 40 fair value model. Bringing in cost model, bringing in what IAS 16 and IAS 40's different elements of depreciations are, what are the different types of depreciation methods, what's and what not of the entire standard is not going to help. So you need to limit your answer to what is required, and the knowledge that you bring in that you can apply to the scenario gets you the marks. All right. Then the mistake number 2, where you ignore the verb. And for this, I have already done a video and I've already delivered a session where I speak about all the exam verbs that are relevant to SBR. All right. So watch that video and understand what different verbs are and what they require you to do. So when you ignore the verb, you do not respond to the question. When you ignore the verb, you do not answer to what you are asked. Therefore, you need to read the verb, understand what the verb wants, and respond accordingly. When you're asked to discuss, when you're asked to conclude, you are required in terms of discussion to weigh both the sides and take a position. Conclude, you're supposed to bring a conclusion. If you ignore the verb and you do not bring the conclusion where you're supposed to conclude, if you do not weigh two sides where you're supposed to weigh both the sides, you are going to gain or you are going to lose marks there. Now, weighing both the sides also is another mistake that the candidates make that we will be looking at shortly. All right. So when you read the question, underline the verb. That's the first thing that you do. Underline the verb so that you understand what you need to do. And while you are writing your answer, go back once. While you are maybe in the middle of the answer, go back once to the requirement, reread the verb, and relook at whether you are fulfilling what the verb wants you to fulfill. Okay? Then the mistake number 3, where you are overspending your time on question 1, because question 1 is a question that has the ability to eat all your time away if you do not manage it properly. Now, how do you manage time? When you break your time down based on the marks that you have. Now, the entire paper is of 100 marks and the time given is 3 hours 15 minutes, so 195 minutes. Let's keep 15 minutes as reading time. So you have 3 hours, which is 180 minutes. You break it down or you divide it by 100 marks, you have 1.8 minutes per mark. All right. So if a question, now let's say question 1 is of 30 marks, so that needs to be 30 into 1.8, which is 54 minutes. And when you look at the question 1, you would have sub requirements. Look at the sub requirements, look at what the marks are allocated there, and multiply that by 1.8 and write it down. This is the time I need to spend here. As the time's up, move on. Even if you've not completed the answer, it's all right. Move on. That's what is important. Moving on is the key. Time's up, move on. Finish all the questions and make yourself within the time frame. If time permits, come back and try to complete it. If not, do not complete. Go ahead with the next question. That is why you need to write down how many minutes do you have for that particular question. In that way, you will be able to manage your time better and not overspend time on any questions. All right. Question 2 is 20 marks, so 36 minutes is what you can spend there. Question 3, question 4, 25 marks each, 25 into 1.8, 45 minutes is what you can spend on these two questions. So make sure you Spend time planning your answer and writing the answer within the allocated time frame. All right. Then mistake number 4 is where the candidates copy the points from the scenario, copy the facts from the scenario and paste it. Not in their own words, not justifying, not applying or bringing in the knowledge that requires application, rather copying the scenario, copying the exhibit and pasting it as it is. All right. Anyway, scenario is given to you. Examiner doesn't want you to take that and paste it and give it to the examiner. That's not what you're supposed to do. Rather, you are supposed to take the points or facts that are required to be applied, meaning use the facts that fulfill the requirement to address the issue. And once you have taken that necessary facts, start analyzing, start applying, start addressing issue in your own words. Apply your own judgment. And that is how you can avoid making the mistake of copying and pasting the scenario itself. All right. Then mistake number 5, where the spreadsheet technique is not fine. It's poor spreadsheet technique where, let's say, the numbers in the draft is given in $1,000,000. You go on with your adjustments and give the numbers in thousands, right? So 1 million in millions is 1. 1 million in thousands is 1,000. So when the draft is 1 and your adjustment is 1,000, 1 plus 1,000 becomes 1,001, while it's supposed to be 1 plus 1, 2 million. Yeah. So you need to keep an eye on that. Or not using plus and minus correctly. Where you are supposed to deduct, you need to use the minus sign. We are supposed to add, you need to use plus sign or just the number without any signs. Yeah. So when you don't use plus and minus properly, that's also going to cause you issues. Now, if you look at the spreadsheet here, now the spreadsheet that you're looking at right in front of you, and look at this. Here, brackets are used. Using brackets is a problem. You need to use minus sign. Do not use brackets. Do not use this. If necessary, use 0. You need to use plus appropriately, minuses appropriately. And then another mistake that the candidates make with spreadsheet is where they go ahead with all the adjustment in one single column. Now in this, you see there is one column for adjustment 1, second column for adjustment 2, third column for adjustment 3. That's how you do it. If you bring all 3 adjustments within this one column, you are going to have your answers cluttered. 600 here, minus 90 here, plus 90 here, minus 600, then minus 250 here. So here 90 plus 250. So your total figure is going to be 340, not this 340. So if your column looks like this, that's also a problem, because you need to leave trails to go back and for examiners to go back and understand where is this answer coming from. You need to leave the trails, which is why use one column for one adjustment and do not clutter all the adjustments in a single column. And then one more issue with spreadsheet technique is where the candidates try to bring in this final column. You have draft, you've done the adjustments, then they bring in the total column or adjusted column where they go from the draft to the adjustments and bring the correct figure. This gets you no marks. This column gets you no marks. So do not waste time and in bringing this column, because this column is just going to waste your time. So make sure you have your debits and credits appropriately. You know that, okay, if this column is balancing 90 plus 90 minus 90 becomes 0, it's balancing, then you are good. You don't need to bother to bring in an adjusted column. All right. Then mistake number 6, where the candidates answer only one side while you are required to answer two sides. That depends on the verb. Understand the verb, you'll understand whether you need to answer one side or you need to answer both the sides. So giving one side of a verb that requires you to answer both the sides gets you half marks. Okay, and does not get you the full marks there. For example, let's say you are talking only about the pros or advantages when you are supposed to weigh both advantages and disadvantages. You talk about weaknesses only while you are supposed to weigh both weaknesses and strengths. Where you only talk about one side of the situation while you're supposed to talk about both the sides. In those cases, you will be limiting yourself to only half the mark. So make sure you look at the verb and respond to the verb in its entirety. Two parts, respond in two parts. Do not limit it in one part. Requires conclusion, bring the conclusion as well. All right. Then comes the mistake number 7, where you just name the threat and do not proceed any further. Yeah. Self-interest threat. You just mention the threat problem. Now you need to mention why is that a threat, right? So there are 3 ways in which you can break down avoiding using only naming threat, right? Number 1, you need to talk about the principle that is at risk because of this threat. Principle that is threatened, right? So what are principles we have? We have self-interest, right? Self-review threat, familiarity, advocacy, intimidation threat. Now, just naming them is not enough. You need to talk about the principle that's being threatened because of those threats. Is it objectivity that's being threatened? Is it confidentiality? Is it integrity? Is it professional behavior? It is professional competence and due care. What is the principle that's being breached or that's being threatened? That's at risk. Name that. And then talk about why. Why does this situation occur? Meaning, why is this threat creating a breach of this principle? Yeah, so this is where you explain the situation from the facts itself, from the exhibit, from the scenario. Whether is there a fee, whether is there a relationship that's there, whether is there a bonus that is there, whether is there a deadline that is there, whether is it the competence or the knowledge gap that is there. Try to identify, read the scenario and identify, okay, what is the problem or what is the main cause or reason for this issue. And then you need to bring the action where necessary. Recommend something doable when action is specifically asked. If the question asks you to bring actions or safeguards, you need to bring the action. So you need to answer all the elements in order to score the full marks. All right. Just naming the threat and stopping and not going into evaluating, analyzing further with the principles, with the why, and with the actions will cause you losing marks. All right. Then mistake number 8, where the candidates merge the sub requirements and answer in one paragraph. Don't do that. Because when you give only one paragraph answering two sub requirements, examiner would not know whether you have answered both the requirements or whether you're answering only one requirement. Therefore, the best way to do this is, let's say there are 2 requirements that's given. Requirement 1, underline. Requirement 2, underline. Then you start talking about it. In this way, you are responding to each of the sub requirement instead of merging these 2 together. All right. So do not merge 2 requirements or 2 sub requirements together. And then when there are 2 year ends that they're talking about that they want you to answer from, so each requirement you need to break it down into 2 years, right? Year 1, year 2. So each requirement gets answered from 2 angles. Yeah. So that's how you make sure that you avoid merging sub requirements and you respond to each of sub requirements appropriately. So use the style of headers. Use subheadings, underline, respond. Subheading, underline, respond. Okay, right. Then the mistake number 9, where the students neglect questions 3 and 4, right? Now, this is where you need to understand when you overspend time on question 1 and question 2, because you know question 1 is going to be from consolidation pack, question 2 is going to be from the ethical pack. You would try to overspend your time there, and you would spend less time on question 3 and 4. What you need to remember is that the the opening of a fresh question gets you or has the potential of gaining you more marks than the closure of an answered question, right? Now, let's say you have responded to question 1 a lot in depth, and you go on writing even after time has ended, right? So in that case, you need to remember that no matter what, the last part of your question 1 is not going to get you as many marks as the first part of a new question, maybe question 3, right? So make sure that you focus on each question appropriately and giving them their sufficient time. That's what we discussed when we spoke about overspending time on any specific questions. All right. And then the 10th mistake that students make is they leave out the why in general. Now, we did look at how the why is required even when you name the threat and you name the objective. There, the why is required. So make sure why is brought in all the elements or all the aspects of your answer from different dimensions. All right. You bring in the treatment, but you do not bring the reason for that treatment. So that the examiner would think that you have just guessed on the treatment. Because you've not shown why you brought that treatment. Therefore, why is very important. Now, for example, here most of the candidates would go on writing the event is non-adjusting. But why is the event non-adjusting? Why does the candidate think that the event is non-adjusting? That's what is key. Event is non-adjusting gets you less marks, but event is non-adjusting because the evidence of the condition did not exist at the reporting date. That gets you full marks because this is the why. This entire part is the why of this treatment. All right. So you need to make sure you do not leave out the why. And as candidates, if you make sure that these 10 mistakes are avoided, you make sure that you gain as many marks as possible. So make sure you focus on the 4 habits, master those habits, and once you master those habits, you would be avoiding to make these mistakes. All the very best.